The fine was taped to my front door like a passive-aggressive love letter. Big red letters, bold print, violation unauthorized gathering, $250. I stared at it while holding a plate of leftover brisket in one hand and a half-drained beer in the other. I'm Archer Sanders, retired firefighter, backyard pitmaster, and apparently a menace to the West Briar Trails HOA, the woman behind this nonsense, Karren Mapleton. Blonde bob, navy cardigan even in July, and a permanent scowl like she just smelled something foul. She ran the HOA like it was her personal fiefdom, and I'd made the mistake of having a good time within earshot of her manicured lawn, my offense. Hosting a weekend BBQ for friends and neighbors. Burgers, ribs, music at a respectful volume, and the smell of smoked hickory drifting over the fences. Nothing wild, just good food and a couple laughs. Karren, however, stormed into my yard mid-brisket like she was leading a SWAT raid. "There are rules, Mr. Sanders," she snapped, pointing at the grill like it had committed a felony. "No events with over 10 guests without prior approval. It's a neighborhood BBQ, not Coachella," I told her, but she wasn't hearing it. Her eyes scanned my setup like she was counting the folding chairs, muttering about HOA bylaws and fire hazards like I hadn't spent 20 years putting out actual house fires. I shrugged it off until Monday morning when the fine showed up, and then 2 more followed. One for unauthorized use of amplified sound, we had a Bluetooth speaker, and another for excessive smoke. That one really got me. By the end of the month, the HOA had stacked up fines totaling over $700. I wasn't the only one they were messing with either. My neighbor, Joel, got fined for leaving his trash bins out 30 minutes past pickup. Clara across the street, hit for using non-approved mulch. It was like Karren had turned into a one-woman code enforcement squad. So I went to the next HOA meeting, held in the community park pavilion, the same park my BBQ guests had helped clean up last spring. Predictably, Karren sat at the head of the table, flanked by her 2 loyal minions, Dana, who nodded like a bobblehead, and Marlene, who scribbled furiously in a notebook every time Karren opened her mouth. I raised my hand. "I'd like to dispute these fines." Karren didn't even look up. "You'll need to file a grievance form and wait for the next review cycle." "When's that?" 3 months, I laughed. "So I just keep getting fined until then? You should consider following the rules, Mr. Sanders," she said, finally looking at me with that smug little half-smile she always wore when she thought she'd won. That's when something in me snapped. "You can push a guy so far, but eventually the fire comes back." I started digging. And 2 weeks later, I found it. The HOA didn't own the park. Turns out the original developer had retained ownership of the green space, and after going bankrupt last year, their remaining assets, including the park, were up for sale. Quiet listing, buried in a city asset management site. I made a few calls, and just like that, I bought it. Every square foot of grass, the pavilion, the benches, the swing set mine. Paid in full. 2 days later, I posted the new signs. Private property, no trespassing without owner's consent, then I locked the gates. The chain on the park gate rattled in the wind like a warning bell, and within 24 hours, the emails started pouring in. Karren's name popped up first, subject line: "Immediate action required." I didn't open it. She wasn't used to being ignored, and I figured letting her stew a little would do her some good. By the second day, Dana and Marlene had shown up at my front door like Jehovah's Witnesses in pastel linen. I let them knock. When they finally gave up and walked away, I flipped the garage lights on and went back to installing the new security camera facing the park entrance. On day 3, the real fireworks started. I was in the middle of repairing my smoker lid when I heard a commotion across the street. 2 men in maintenance uniforms, neither of whom lived in the neighborhood, were fiddling with the park gate. One had bolt cutters. The other held a clipboard and kept glancing nervously around. I set my wrench down, walked across the street, and leaned against the fence. "Can I help you fellas?" The one with the clipboard cleared his throat. "We're here on behalf of the HOA to perform emergency access maintenance." I nodded slowly. "Funny, I don't recall giving anyone permission to disturb my property." Clipboard guy hesitated. "We were told the park falls under HOA jurisdiction. You were told wrong, I said, pulling out my phone. You cut that chain, and I'll have the police here before you're through the first link. They backed off, muttering something about miscommunication and just following orders. I stood there until they left, then pulled the footage from the camera and uploaded it to a private drive. If Karren was going to start playing dirty, I'd be ready. The next HOA meeting drew the biggest crowd I'd seen since moving in. Folding chairs were packed wall to wall. People stood in the back, whispering and watching. Karren sat at the front table, arms folded tight, jaw clenched so hard it looked like her molars were trying to escape. I waited until the budget review ended before standing up. Point of order, I said. I'd like to address an attempted illegal entry onto my property 3 days ago. Karren's nostrils flared. That matter has been resolved. It was a misunderstanding. I disagree. It was coordinated trespassing, and I have video. A ripple went through the room. Dana leaned forward, voice brittle. Mr. Sanders, we've always had access to that park. It's common space. That may have been true before the land was sold at auction. I bought it. It's private now. I've filed the deed with the county. Anyone entering without permission is trespassing. Marlene made a noise like she was choking on her pen cap. I pulled a folder from under my arm and walked to the front of the room, placing copies of the deed and sale record on the table. Karren refused to look down. You're playing games with community resources, she said. No, I replied. I'm protecting my property from a board that fines people for playing music at a cookout, and now you're authorizing break-ins. I turned to the crowd. If anyone's got personal property stored in that park, bikes, garden tools, whatever, you've got 48 hours to collect it. After that, it's getting hauled out. An older man near the back raised his hand. So, you really bought it? Yes. And you're not letting anyone in? Not until the HOA retracts the fines they've been handing out like candy and agrees to a vote on new leadership. That got the room buzzing. Karren banged her gavel. This meeting is adjourned, she snapped, but no one moved. Not this time. The next morning, I found a letter taped to my door again. This one was more serious legal letterhead, signed by a firm called Rothman and Klein. It accused me of willful obstruction of community resources and threatened a lawsuit unless I reinstated open access within 72 hours. I drove straight to the county courthouse and filed a cease and desist, naming the HOA board members personally. The clerk raised an eyebrow when she read the circumstances. You really bought their park out from under them? I did. She shook her head. You might want to get legal counsel. If they're escalating, you should be covered. I was already ahead of her. My niece, Savannah, had passed the bar 2 years back and was hungry for actual courtroom experience. She'd been waiting for a case with teeth. I called her that afternoon. By Thursday, Savannah had filed a motion for injunctive relief and submitted a criminal complaint for attempted unlawful entry. The police opened a case file, and the officers assigned were less than thrilled to hear about a neighborhood board ordering people onto private land. Word spread fast. By the weekend, neighbors who'd stayed silent before started approaching me. Some offered help. Others passed along documents, email chains, fine notices, even photos showing Karren holding HOA meetings at the park without notifying residents. One man handed me a flash drive. I used to be on the board, he said. Got pushed out when I questioned some of the bookkeeping. Didn't delete my backups, though. Savannah spent all weekend combing through the files. What she found made her sit up straight. Karren's been funneling money from the HOA's discretionary fund to a private landscaping company owned by her cousin, she told me. They've been inflating invoices for years. That's embezzlement. We sent everything to the police. Monday morning, 2 patrol cars rolled into the neighborhood. Karren wasn't home, but Dana was. She nearly dropped her groceries when they asked her to come in for questioning. Marlene tried to claim ignorance, but the officers had printouts of authorizations with her signature. That afternoon, I reopened the park, but only to residents. I posted a new sign. Community Park privately maintained, residents welcome, HOA board members not permitted pending investigation. The mood in the neighborhood shifted fast. Kids were back on the swings. Couples walked their dogs along the trail. People waved again. The HOA's power started to unravel. Without Karren and her inner circle calling the shots, residents began organizing their own meetings. No fines, no threats, just folks figuring out how to make the neighborhood work again. And as for Karren, she finally came home 2 days later, red-faced and furious, only to find an eviction notice from the board taped to her front door. Turns out, she'd been living in a property technically owned by the HOA's Communal Assets Fund. She didn't say a word as she tore it down. But the cameras caught her face as she saw the new banner strung across the park gate. Welcome to Sanders Green. A week after the banner went up, the neighborhood felt like it had exhaled for the first time in years. Lawn chairs reappeared on porches. Kids rode bikes without parents, nervously glancing for clipboard carrying volunteers. The silence on the HOA's side of things wasn't peace, it was the calm before the reckoning. Savannah called me early Friday morning, her voice tight. They filed a countersuit. Civil action claiming you're interfering with community cohesion and property values. I sat down on the bench outside the park, watching a boy toss a football to his dad near the swings. Did they bring up the deed? They're pretending it's invalid. But here's the thing, they used HOA funds to hire the attorney. That's misappropriation. Again. I rubbed my jaw. How deep does this go? There's more, she said. I dug into the landscaping contracts. You remember the cousin? He owns 6 companies, all LLCs. Every one of them funneled into a single account under a different name. It's money laundering. My fingers curled around the edge of the bench. Savannah continued, her tone low. I'm forwarding everything to the DA. This isn't just HOA corruption. This is organized financial fraud. That weekend, I hosted a community meeting not under any official title, just a gathering of neighbors tired of being left in the dark. We set up in the park under the pavilion, the one Karren used to reserve for board-only sessions. Clara brought folding chairs. Joel set up a whiteboard. The crowd was bigger than any HOA meeting had ever drawn. Folks, I said, standing in front of the group, we've got a chance to rebuild this place. But not if we let the same people rig the game after they get caught cheating. A hand went up near the back. It was Mrs. Forrester, the retired schoolteacher who used to get fined for her garden gnomes. What happens if they win the case? She asked. Can they take the park back? Savannah stepped up beside me, calm and confident in her slacks and blazer. No, Archer owns the land outright. The deed is ironclad, but they're trying to force arbitration and tie up access through litigation. It's a tactic. If they drag this through court long enough, they think people will give up. A teenager raised his hand. Is it true they stole money? Savannah nodded. We've submitted evidence to the county prosecutor. It includes bank transfers, falsified invoices, and internal emails. Real charges are on the table. A murmur rolled through the crowd. After the meeting ended, a man in a maintenance uniform hung back. I'd never seen him before early 60s. Sun-darkened skin, and a nervous glance that kept flicking toward the street. I used to work for the cousin's landscaping crew, he said quietly. Haven't been paid in 6 months. They kept shutting down one company, opening another. Same trucks, same equipment, different name on the paperwork. I've got photos. You willing to talk to the police? I asked. I already did. Gave them everything. 2 days later, unmarked cars pulled up outside Karren's house. The officers didn't knock. They walked in with a warrant. She was escorted out in a gray hoodie, sunglasses on, head down, flanked by 2 detectives. No one cheered, but windows opened. People watched. A few took photos. By the end of the week, 4 other board members had been indicted. The charges ranged from wire fraud to obstruction of justice. Dana and Marlene disappeared overnight, their houses dark and mail piling up. The interim HOA president was a quiet man named Louis, a retired postal inspector who'd kept his head down for years. He called me the following Monday. I don't want to fight you, he said. I want to fix this. I met him in the park. He didn't bring a lawyer, just a binder and a pen. I've reviewed the bylaws, he said, flipping through the pages. There's no clause that prohibits the HOA from leasing land. If you're willing, we could negotiate a community agreement. Residents get access, you retain ownership, and the HOA pays maintenance fees. I studied his face. No smugness. No bluster, just a man trying to salvage something. You agree to dissolve all remaining fines issued under the previous board, already in motion. You'll hold a vote to rewrite the bylaws within 60 days. I extended my hand. Then maybe we've got a deal. The new agreement was signed 3 days later. Savannah reviewed every line. Residents got full access to Sanders Green, and I retained full control over usage rights. The HOA paid a monthly lease fee that went straight into a community improvement fund, managed by an independent CPA. But the real change wasn't in contracts. It was in the people. Mrs. Forrester's gnomes doubled in number. Joel built a free library box and stocked it with paperbacks. Kids painted a mural on the side of the pavilion, bright swirls of color that made the place feel alive. And Karren, she was indicted on 6 federal charges. The trial made the local news. Her cousin fled the state but was picked up at a bus station in Amarillo. The court froze their assets, and the forensic accountants started digging deeper. Investigators discovered that over the past 8 years, nearly $180,000 had been siphoned from HOA dues into fake service contracts. At the sentencing hearing, Savannah sat beside me. The judge didn't mince words. You abused the trust of your neighbors for personal gain. You treated a community like your private kingdom. That ends today. Karren got 5 years. No parole for the first 2. When we left the courthouse, a reporter tried to get a comment. Savannah held up her hand, but I stepped forward. Tell your readers one thing, I said. When neighbors look out for each other, no one gets to play queen. Back in West Briar Trails, things stayed quiet for a while. The new board operated under full transparency monthly reports, open meetings, and zero tolerance for abuse of power. I still held the deed to the park. Not because I wanted control, but because I needed to protect what we'd reclaimed. Every Saturday, I fired up the smoker. People brought sides, cornbread, mac and cheese, homemade pies. We didn't need permission slips or permits. We had something better, trust, and brisket. Always brisket. There was a new rhythm in West Briar Trails. One that didn't come from board mandates or warning letters, but from the slow, steady rebuilding of trust. On a humid Thursday morning, I was planting a row of sunflowers along the park fence when a city vehicle pulled up. A tall man in khakis and a worn utility vest stepped out. He walked with the kind of patience that comes from decades on the job. Archer Sanders, he asked, eyeing the clipboard in his hand. That's me. He extended a hand. Dale Torres, City Planning and Zoning, got a request here for property reclassification. Says you're requesting recreational zoning status with private rights. That's right, I said, wiping my hands on a rag. Just need to make sure no future disputes happen. This way it's clear who's responsible for upkeep and who's not. Dale nodded slowly. Smart. Cuts off any attempt to claim public domain access. I'll walk the perimeter, take a few notes. Shouldn't take long. As he started down the trail, I spotted Savannah pulling into the lot. She stepped out of her car, already on a call, her expression tight. She hung up as she reached me. The DA's office just filed an additional charge against Karren and her cousin, she said without preamble. Tax evasion. They found a shell account in Arizona used for skimming off HOA payment processing fees. That's federal. Anything new from the forensic audit? I asked. They're tracing a payment made to a consulting firm that doesn't exist. It was listed in last year's HOA budget as an infrastructure review. I leaned against the fence post, watching Dale inspect the irrigation spigots near the walking path. Think they'll go after restitution? They already filed a motion, Savannah said. If it goes through, every resident could get a check. That evening, the neighborhood gathered again, not for a meeting, but for the first outdoor movie night in years. Clara had borrowed a projector from her nephew, and Joel ran extension cords from his garage. Families brought blankets, kids carried glow sticks, and someone set up a popcorn machine near the pavilion. As dusk settled, I saw Louis standing off to the side, arms crossed loosely, watching the scene unfold. I walked over to him. Didn't expect you to show, I said. I figured I owed it to everyone, he replied. Especially after how blind I was to what was happening. You weren't the only one, I said. They were good at covering their tracks. Louis glanced at the crowd. We held the recall vote. It passed unanimously. The board is officially dissolved, temporary committees in place. No one wants power anymore, they just want peace. He handed me a manila envelope. What's this? I asked. Final financial records. Everything post-audit, cleaned and verified. The committee voted to transfer discretionary control of all future park funds to you. You've earned that. I opened the envelope, flipping through the documents. Every dollar accounted for, every transaction transparent. I'll have Savannah review them, I said, of course. The movie started an old comedy that had everyone laughing within the first few minutes. I stayed near the back, watching the faces light up in the flickering glow of the screen. The sense of ease was new, not just relief but something deeper. People had come back to life. The following week, I got a call from the county courthouse. "We need your presence as a witness," the clerk said. "The prosecution wants testimony about the property acquisition and your interactions with the board during the dispute period." Courtrooms were never my favorite places, but I showed up in a suit that still barely fit and took the stand calmly. The prosecutor, a woman with sharp eyes and a voice like gravel, asked her questions with surgical precision. "Mr. Sanders, did the HOA ever inform you of any formal grievance process before issuing multiple fines?" "No, ma'am." "Did they ever provide documentation proving that gatherings over 10 people required prior approval per the bylaws?" "They did not." "Were you ever notified that the park was under HOA ownership before you purchased it?" "Never." I found the auction listing myself through a city asset repository. She handed me a printed photo. "This is the sign you posted after acquiring the land." "Yes." "Did any member of the HOA board contact you to negotiate access before attempting to physically remove the locks?" "No." "They sent contractors without my consent." She turned to the judge. "Your Honor, we submit that the HOA board, under the leadership of Karren Mapleton, knowingly misrepresented their legal authority and committed multiple acts of fraud in pursuit of personal financial gain. We ask that Mr. Sanders' testimony be entered as a primary exhibit." The judge nodded. The defense tried to argue that the park had always been functionally communal, but the deed, the auction records, and Savannah's airtight filings left them no room to maneuver. Karren never looked at me once during the entire hearing. Her cousin, slouched beside her, whispered back and forth with his attorney until the judge threatened to hold them both in contempt. The guilty verdict came back in under 2 hours. On the courthouse steps, Savannah met me with a quiet nod. "Restitution is approved," she said. "Residents will receive compensation checks within 60 days. The court seized the last of their assets this morning, and the board, legally barred from serving on any community governing body for 10 years minimum." As we walked back to the parking lot, Savannah paused. "You know, I've handled some petty legal fights, but this turned into something real. You gave people their neighborhood back." "I didn't do it alone," I said. "It took everyone stepping up." She smiled, genuine and proud. "Still, maybe don't buy any more parks," I laughed. "No promises. Back in West Briar Trails, life moved on." The park, still Sanders Green for now, became the epicenter of something better. Not just barbecues and movie nights, but food drives, school supply swaps, even a small Saturday market where residents sold handmade crafts or homegrown produce. The community fund, managed transparently through an open ledger, paid for new benches and a mural wall where kids could paint whatever they wanted. There were no more fines, no backroom decisions, just people working things out face to face. One afternoon, I found Joel painting a birdhouse on the pavilion table. He looked up as I approached. "You hear the city's naming us their neighborhood of the month," I raised an eyebrow. "Didn't know that was a thing." "Apparently it is. They're sending someone to take pictures next week." I looked around, sunflowers blooming along the fence, a couple of teenagers tossing a frisbee, Clara chatting with a young mother near the sandbox. "Not bad for a place that used to be run by fear," Joel nodded. "We built something better without them." That night, as the sun dipped behind the rooftops and the cicadas started their chorus, I sat on my porch with a glass of lemonade and listened. No arguments, no clipboard patrols, just laughter in the distance. The park lights flicked on automatically, casting a soft glow over the grass and trees. The same lights the HOA once tried to charge a special fee to upgrade, now funded by the very people who used them. I didn't need to lock the gates anymore. No threats lingered. No schemes brewed behind closed doors. Justice had done its job, and the neighborhood had done the rest. That was enough.